Hi there friends, welcome back to the channel. Today, as you can probably already see, we're going for a slightly different approach, something a little bit longer form, almost a bit of a podcasty type vibe. We've got a special guest that is going to introduce herself in a second, and yeah, we'll see how we get on. So do you want to let everybody know who you are and what you're doing here today?
Yeah, I'm Rachel, so I live with this lovely man here. We've been living together for 3 years and we actually met at Deloitte. I joined the year before him and we were good friends for a while.
We were.
And then one thing led to another and we've now been in a relationship, haven't we, since
We have.
However long.
Approximately 3 years.
Approximately 3 years, yeah. You can tell we're accountants. And we're here to talk about...
Yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about, we haven't planned this too much, so please don't expect too much from us, but we're going to talk a little bit about what we think it takes to succeed or excel in a Big Four audit graduate scheme, or actually in your case, not a graduate scheme, but go on, tell them a story about that.
Okay, so I actually joined Deloitte. So for those of you who don't not know, there's kind of 4 accountancy firms, PwC, KPMG, EY and Deloitte, that are known as the Big Four professional services firms. And I didn't know really any of this. I went to school, obviously, went to college and kind of was at the position where I was thinking, do I want to go to university? It was when the £9,000 a year was coming into play, and I thought,
you're young, aren't you?
I don't want to pay £9,000 a year to go to university and study a subject I don't think I want to do. I always knew that I wanted to go into business, I wanted to make money, I basically wanted to be whatever it was in Dragon's Den, and so
Deborah.
I thought, yeah, Deborah Meaton, exactly. And so I thought, oh well, I'll see what's online. And there was a website called Not Going to Uni or something along those lines.com, and I started looking through and saw this like Deloitte, and I thought, that sounds alright. I'll apply. Deloitte. Yes, and I thought, I'll apply to that. I picked Reading because I thought, well, it's close to home. I'll commute in. I'll be able to drive in.
Reading in the UK, for any of our Asian or American viewers out there, of which there are probably very few.
There's many.
There will be one day, hopefully.
So anyway, I applied there and I got a job. And so I really went into doing audit and throwing myself into an ACA qualification without really knowing what I was getting myself into, and the rules in terms of, I'm sure you've probably seen the videos, and if you haven't, check them out in terms of the rules of being fired. I know you've covered that in some of the other videos,
yeah,
but they all still stand. So by and large, it's exactly the same process. You're doing the same job.
You're treated no differently, are you, basically? I think that, is it slightly more lenient, the firing rules, but basically it's exactly the same. So I always, whenever I'm talking about it in any of my videos, I always call it a Big Four graduate scheme. I suppose technically that's not quite true, because actually those videos are aimed at a slightly larger subset of people, not just graduates. I'm not quite sure what the right word for it. What is it?
It's called a Bright Start scheme, and actually it was called,
if you wanted to include
it was called like an apprenticeship scheme. And actually I really hated the word apprenticeship, because without trying to sound like an absolute snob, when you think of an apprenticeship, you tend to think of hairdressing or construction and things like that. And so I did have to tell people at the age of 18, you know, I've done A-levels, I have done like GCSEs, I've done really well in those, and yet I'm doing an apprenticeship, and they'd be like, oh, like, good for you, that's really good. But it's pretty much the same, and it's kind of trying to overcome that hurdle with other people's preconceptions of what an apprenticeship is, because it is technically an apprenticeship, but it's not, because you're doing exactly the same qualification and exactly the same job. It's just a different scheme. You're not
a graduate.
Yeah, and I think the main difference is...
So it's not called a graduate scheme, but we will... that's the introduction. We're 5 minutes in. We will actually start the video now. And the point of what we're going to talk about today is to try and give an idea of what we think, based on our experience of working with people that have excelled in these areas and people that haven't, what it takes to do really well, come across as being one of the best in your year when you're on a Big Four audit. I'll call it a training scheme. And I think, first up, if we try and just isolate what we think the actual key character traits or the key competencies people need are, or what people might think you need to do well, things that spring to mind for me are: you need to be clever, you need to work hard, you need to be good with people. I think they're the three obvious ones. Beyond that, there's probably things like, do you think being able to sort of play the corporate game is relevant to an extent, or are you
I don't
worrying too much if you're getting bogged down with playing the corporate game at that stage?
I don't think in your first year, the way I try and think of it, or I probably didn't think of it, but I did think of it in like later years, is that you've got someone who is the partner of the firm, who's been in the firm for, I don't know, 20, 30 years and is making 800 grand a year. And they manage to onboard a client who needs an audit done. Their audit committee, or the people who are on the board, say, we want it done by a Big Four, we want someone to do a really thorough job. They bring in Deloitte. They bring in a fee, and so that fee, the way audit works at Deloitte and all the other Big Four and all the other accounting firms, is that people get day rates, and so you basically allocate that time. You've got your minimum profit, and so you basically got to work out how many hours is it going to get the job done. And that's going to be made up of the partners then going to have a senior manager or a director on the job. They're going to have a manager and an assistant manager, who is typically a field manager. They're the person on site delegating, like, the grunt work, really, isn't it, to the people who are on the training programs to do actually the testing, do the audit work themselves. So I think the main thing is actually not complaining and getting the job done, because the hours, and I think the main thing is there's a finite number of hours that are going to be allocated to the job. And so if you don't do your job properly, or you don't put the time in or put enough effort in to do the job, it's going to be the field manager who ultimately has to pick up the slack and do your work for you.
So when you go back a level from there, what is the actual skill, you think? Because not complaining is not really a skill in itself. The skill is, what are you saying, be diligent enough, work hard enough so that your work's always finished. Is that what
I think that's the main thing, being open to it, having an appreciation of there's a finite amount of work to be done. It's going to be allocated between 4 or 5 people. Be open to the work, ask the questions, don't just sit on things, and be receptive to being given more work, and ultimately just help. You're not trying to help get an audit done, you're trying to help get the field manager to get their piece of work done, of which you are part of that.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Because the field manager, say, has got 60% of the work to do, they're going to allocate 10% of that to you, 10% to someone else. Try and get their 60% done. Don't cause them problems.
So, okay, so that's the sort of bigger picture. That's one way to frame it in your own mind, guys. Is that actually, there's a story I like, which is basically I'm not quite sure where it comes from, but in terms of work motivations and people staying positive about their job, there was a survey done of people that used to work in the offices at NASA, and they'd say to, like, the chief rocket engineers, what are you doing today? And they'd be like, I'm going to try and help land a man on the moon or wherever they were going. And then they'd say to somebody slightly lower down, what's your job? And they'd say, I'm basically helping out in the same project, but I do specifically this. And then they'd go down to the cleaners that are basically cleaning the toilets in the NASA offices. What are you doing here today? And they would still be saying, I'm here to land a man on the moon, I'm just a small cog in the chain. What you're saying actually is frame it slightly differently than that, almost the opposite, and say, forget about the fact that there's a huge billion-dollar company out there that the audit needs to get done. It actually helps in this situation to narrow your frame of reference down and think, right, there's somebody that's a couple of years older than me, they've got to test these handful of balances from an audit perspective. How can I help them in the most efficient way possible?
Yeah, that's definite. I think that's definitely it, because when you start thinking of the big picture, it's a complicated thing. You can almost get like starstruck to a certain extent of thinking, oh my god, like I'm auditing this multi-billion-pound company. No,
especially
you're not.
if it's a name you've actually. I find that's more relevant if it's a name you've. There's plenty of billion-dollar companies out there you've never heard of, but if it's a name
like House of Fraser, didn't we? Body Shop,
Microsoft,
Just Eat, Microsoft. Yeah.
If there's names you've actually heard of, it makes a big difference. And yeah, starstruck is one word for it. Maybe that's how celebrities feel when they. But yeah. So right, I think we've nailed down the fact that okay, you want to try and isolate. Your job is, as a first year, no one's going to be expecting you to run the show. You're just going to help out the assistant manager, the field manager, get their elements of the things done, and the partners and senior managers can worry about the rest. What I'm interested in is how do you help those people do that? Okay, you are proactive in asking for more work. You work hard when you get given stuff. You don't complain. You're clever, so you well sort of versed in how it all works, so you can do the work efficiently and quickly. If you had to me, that is one side of things. The other side of things is actually how you. Well, maybe you'd say just being good at that is enough to feed into the wider picture of getting promoted and getting the bonuses. Do you think that's the key? There is no game to play. There's no like make friends with the senior managers. You just want to do your job as well as you can, play with a straight bat, and the bonuses and the top ranking will come your way. Do you think that's it, or do you think there's any other aspects to it?
I think it's not as much as what you do, it's what you don't do. And what you definitely don't do, and we were both in the position, weren't we? We went from being the person who was being told what to do to the person where you were actually having junior people coming in who you're like giving them the tasks to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about you, but one thing that was a real bugbear for me was you tell someone to do something, they do it. And one of the great things that's so good that you don't get in a lot of other jobs is the social aspect. So you're like having a day's work and then you're going out with these people, actually making friends with them out of a work setting, going to clubs and whatnot, having like a great time. And often, not all the time, but certainly some of the time, what you would hate is then on a Monday morning, the junior person, while you've still got your job to do, then thinking they've kind of crossed some boundary, so they're your friend and therefore they're immune from doing the work.
Oh shit! I did that all the time. Is that not what you should do?
I think that's one of the things that's kind of like being humble. That take the nights as you like, take all the plus size and all this kind of thing. But the best thing you can do, your job ultimately is not to do an audit. Your job is to make the person who's more senior than you make their job easier. They're going to be the person doing your feedback. The partner's not going to be doing your feedback as a first year. It's going to be someone who's 2 years more senior than you. And so the way of getting the good feedback and getting promoted and ultimately getting the pay rise and getting a better job in the long run, if you want to leave Deloitte, if you want to stay there, or any of the other big four, it's all about just making their life easier. And so
that's pretty good. You would never have got that insight if it wasn't for this. If it wasn't for today's special guest, I would never have come up with that, because I was actually guilty of thinking, probably not consciously, but I think it's difficult to treat someone that, when you're down here and there's somebody that is nominally your manager, and then you go on the nights out with them and you feel like that gap is bridged to an extent, it is difficult to still treat them in exactly the same way in terms of working exactly the same with exactly the same level of diligence and all that sort of thing. So That is actually a good tip, and not something I would have necessarily come up with. Right, so we'll have that one down as tip number 1. Are there any other nuggets of wisdom you'd like to share with these people? And then there's not sort of obvious.
I don't think you go into when you join one of these programs.
So can I interrupt you? Do you know what I thought you were going to say when you started explaining the first one? When you said we've been in the situation where we were the bottom of the ladder and you climb up a few steps, and what you realise is really annoying is when this happens. I thought you were going to say when you're explaining to somebody a relatively basic task. Hi, can you please go through these? Whatever. We've got a list of monthly PDFs, 36 PDFs going back on a monthly basis for the last 3 years. I just need you to go through and summarise the 5 different stock categories from each one and add in a total at the bottom, so we've got monthly stock balances for the 3 years going backwards. And you make it seem quite simple to them. You show them an example. They go away for however long that takes, 90 minutes, 2 hours or something, come back and they've done something completely different to what you asked them to do. And it basically comes down to the fact they weren't listening properly, or if they were listening, they didn't understand and they didn't ask a follow-up question. And I thought that's what you were going to say, because that would be my tip, would be if you're in that boat of being a first year and you're given these sorts of relatively step-by-step instructions. The reason people are giving you step-by-step instructions is because they know you're new to it all. They're expecting you to ask questions. So firstly, make sure you're listening. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by not listening to what they're saying in the first place. And then beyond that, if you are listening and you still don't understand, ask a question, because it's way better to do it there and then and get that ironed out, rather than waste 2 hours trawling through 36 PDFs doing the wrong thing, typing in the wrong balances, and then going back and being like, oh, I finished that work you gave me, and actually they look at it and they think you're an idiot because you've typed in all the wrong numbers. So that would be my other tip, is ask plenty of questions if you're not sure. Sorry, I interrupted you.
But I think that goes back to, it all kind of goes into the point of put yourself in the person who's not like, I don't know, 20 years senior in their shoes, but put yourself in the shoes of the person who's given you the task to do.
Yeah, 2 years.
Because
senior.
There is, like, in an audit is a multiple of time and hours. No, that doesn't make any sense. So, like, it's you have a job to do and you distribute that.
That was nearly very insightful.
Nearly really good, wasn't it?
Is it time and you mean time and work?
Time and work, yeah.
That's why it's my channel. You get the odd nugget over here, but really it's the brains behind the operation.
You have a finite amount of time. So say it's a year end and there's all kinds of regulations. If an audit isn't done on time, especially with listed companies, the company itself is going to get fined a lot of money, and it's going to lose a lot of confidence with investors and all that kind of thing. It's really important to get
results announcement dates. That's one thing from another video of mine, which is I will link up here if you want to check that one out, which is about the difference between...
Is it our link now?
No, I said I'll link that up here.
Oh, right, sorry.
I'll link that up here. It's a link to a video around the difference between, well, in terms of which department to apply to, listed, public businesses or privately owned businesses. And like Rachel says, one of the things with public companies is there's that extra level of regulation. This isn't so much regulation, but typically they've committed to announce their results on a certain day when the audit's concluded, and if you're the auditor that's holding up that announcement, then there's going to be a pretty angry client on the other end of the phone. So yeah, check out that video. But
yeah, and in more commercial terms, how many times have you seen on the news report or anything that an audit, them not being able to reach a conclusion on the audit, has stopped an announcement? You never hear that, and that's because they'll get it over the line one way or the other, because if they don't get it over the line, they'll lose business. Audit is already, in the marketplace, it's low margin. People are really struggling to get the work done efficiently, cost efficiently. And so you're a small cog in that piece, but ultimately the work will be done. It's just that the work that you don't do is going to be passed on to the next person in the chain. If they don't do it, it's passed on to the next person in the chain. So I think that when you're coming in, you don't need to look at the audit as a whole. You just need to think of, you're basically like someone's PA, aren't you? You're the next person's, the person who's one step more senior than you. You're just serving them. They're serving the next person along, and all that. And ultimately, you're just trying to make their job easier.
That's a good way to. It's a sort of humbling way to look at it. A lot of people, I think, go into Big Four thinking they've probably done pretty well in school. If they've gone to university, they've done pretty well there. They've managed to land themselves a Big Four job, and then they think they're sort of Billy Big Bollocks and they've made it, and that's their name on the CV and they're sorted. But realistically, and I don't think this is just Big Four, if you went in anywhere, one of the banks, I'm sure it would be a similar situation. You have a fantastic name on your CV, but realistically, in those first few years, between the age of early to mid 20s, you are going to be somebody's bitch. And even as you get, like Rachel says, even as you progress, you're going to be someone else's bitch, just they're going to be one step higher up the ladder, and that's how the whole thing works. But I think bearing that in mind is quite a humbling way to look at it, and I think it's something that catches people out, because they go in thinking they turn up on day one as a first year in their fancy suit and they think they're going to be running the show, or they're some sort of hot shot. But actually, like you said, the most important thing is just help out that person above you, work hard, listen, concentrate, and do your job.
Be personable. And I also think there's a lot of things that go around in terms of, actually, people who come straight from school are often better at the day job than, they're not as clever, they don't have as much experience, but they're often better than the graduates. And the only reason for that, they're not as clever, they're not as experienced, but the only reason for that is...
So you're not as clever as me?
No, I am now, but this is many years on.
Back in the day.
But back in the day, the only reason for that is you haven't had that gap at university where you're your own boss, you go to lectures, you do what you want, you're in charge of your schedule. You've gone straight from an environment where the teacher tells you, you do this, you do that.
Yeah, you never have the
freedom to do
false
that.
Promises of not being the bitch. You're just the bitch all the way through.
And so then you just transition seamlessly into, okay, it doesn't end at 3, it ends at 5:30 or 6 or 7 if you're lucky, sometimes longer in busy season. But it's just an extension of that. Whereas often when people go to university, they suddenly think, oh my god, like, I'm so creative, I've got first, I'm way cleverer than you, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the other. And then it's a bit of a shock to then come back down and be humbled into that. So I think it's just a case of preempting that, knowing it's not forever. You'll do your few years, lip service to a certain extent. Okay, you might think you're an idiot.
I never know what the word lip service means.
It's just kind of like paying lip service is saying like yes man, no man, whatever, like saying what they want you to hear.
But
even
what
if
does
you
that
don't
mean?
agree,
Why is that called lip service?
I don't know. This can be another video altogether, but it's just the case of playing the game, doing the things that you need to do, even if you don't agree with them. It's not your job to cause problems. You as a first year, as hard as it may be, you might go in with this burning desire to uncover, like, I don't know, JD Sports, multi-billion fraudulent activities. You're not going to do that. If anyone's going to do that, it's going to be the partner, and it's going to be the senior manager. So you do your little bit, make your life easy, get your promotion. The promotions are good, the pay rises are good.
Pass your exams, and there's other videos on the channel about that. So check them out if you missed the link from earlier. I think we've actually, how far are we in? 25 minutes. I think that's been pretty helpful. So just to wrap it up, we are saying some things that are important to bear in mind starting out on the Big Four, on a Big Four training scheme, is well, lastly, we discussed the importance of going in with that sort of humble mindset that you're not going to be Billy Big Bollocks. You've got to do as you're told and work hard. We're saying frame it in the sense of not getting too almost have your blinkers on and just thinking, right, it's my job to help out this person. They need to do this. They're going to delegate certain tasks. I'm going to try and do those tasks. Anything that I get passed on to the best of my ability. Did we say a third thing in the middle of those two?
No.
Being personable, working hard.
Maybe something along the lines of don't kind of just because you've been on a night out with them.
It was the friends thing.
Don't think you're best friends on a Monday morning. Don't think you can turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning, because ultimately, if you do turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning, they're going to have to do your work.
But equally, there is something to be said for being a part of the social.
Oh yeah, you have
circle.
to do that, because they'll have your back.
And not trying to. Yeah, it's that balance between you want to be part of the social circle. You're not so you can take the piss and leverage it to your advantage, but I think there is, like, to an extent, are you probably going to get slightly more favourable feedback or get booked on slightly better jobs by people that know you because of nights out? Like, that sort of thing is definitely a factor. So yeah,
it all feeds into the same thing, doesn't it? Of like, it's impressing the person above you. Say I started my own business and I employed you because you were my best friend or whatever.
Oh, best friends.
Would we have a great time on a night out? Yes. Would I get closer to you on that night out and think we're like best buds? Yes. But then on a Monday morning, when I'm the one who's got to make the money, or I'm the one who's got to like do the job, would I be pissed off if you turned up at 11 o'clock in the morning and said, "Oh, sorry, like I thought we were just on that level"?
Yeah,
like you are and you aren't.
You
it's
might
that
think,
kind of
as a
thing.
first year, you're going to think you're on that level. Realistically, you're probably not. If you are, you're very lucky and you've got better personal, social skills than I do. So yeah, I don't know why you're watching these videos. You go off and do your own thing. That is it from us today, the new Dream Team. If you like this sort of format of video, this chatty style, then let me know. What was that for?
Let us know. No, it's more just cute, isn't it? It's cute.
Let us know down in the comments. If not, let us know that as well, and I will. Well, the special guest can never appear again. That's absolutely not a problem. But yeah, that's it. All the best till next time, guys.
Cheers.
Stay safe. Let's do a little cheers.
Here's the gin. Is it gin wag? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I didn't announce that at the start. I think we're going to call it, if you guys like this type of vibe, then we're going to call it the
weekly gin wag.
A weekly gin wag.
Relationship gin wag.
No, not about relationships. About the big four.
Best friend gin wag.
Cheers. Bye, guys.